Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today, this Friday, to talk a little bit about Quanta Change. My name is Sarah Avery, and I am the Executive Director of Quanta Change, and thank you so much for joining me today. So, I'm curious if you've ever been asked a question like this one. Why are you choosing to be sick? Why are you choosing to have crisis in your life all the time? Why are you choosing to have so much drama? Maybe why are you choosing to have such a negative outlook on life? Have you ever been asked any of those kinds of questions? Why are you choosing misery in some way? Or maybe are you someone who's actually asked that question of someone? Maybe because you care about them, but you're just baffled by the fact that they always seem to have something negative going on for them, or they always seem to have such a negative sense of life. So if you're the second kind of person, I'm hoping that I can shed some light today on why that happens, because if it's not your experience, it can be confusing, right? And hopefully by the end of my talk today, you will be convinced that that's not a question that you'd like to ask someone again. But if you are the kind of person who tends to have something negative going on for you, maybe it's in your health, maybe it's in your relationships, your work life, maybe it's just in how you feel about life, how you anticipate things happening for you. Have you tried to do something about that? Have you tried to fix it? Maybe you've done therapy. Maybe you've done some kind of self-help work. Maybe you meditate. Maybe you've done some hypnotherapy, perhaps energy work. Maybe if it's in your health, you've done various different kinds of treatments. Maybe you're nodding your head yes to all of this. Yes, Sarah, I have done all of that. I hear that from clients all the time, that they've tried for years or decades to change how things work for them. If things are just continually feeling like there's a negative, that another shoe is going to drop, that there's another negative event coming for them. And so if that's you, have some of those things work for you? Have they helped? Have they eased things up? If so, that's fantastic. You found something that works for you, and that's the best thing in the world. If you haven't, are you still feeling like you wake up and you still feel the same way? The same kinds of patterns keep happening in your relationships or in your work or in your health, and you just can't feel like you can get on top of it. If so, first, what I want you to hear is it's not your fault that those things haven't worked for you. It's not that you haven't tried hard enough. It's not that you haven't spent enough time doing those things. The reason that those things have not worked for you is that they have not been able to get to the root of the problem. So today I'm going to talk to you about what the root of the problem is and how you actually can get to that root and start to peel some of it away so that you can actually feel better. So the root of all of these negative patterns that we tend to have going on in our lives, especially if they keep repeating and we can't figure out how to address them. This root is called learned distress. It's this Quanta Change term for the feeling that you absorbed very early in life, that there's something wrong with you being just the way that you are. And learned distress was absorbed before you had a choice, because what I want to talk today about is the fact that no one ever chooses to be miserable. No one chooses to be sick. No one chooses to have crises happening over and over again. That's just not how it works. So here's the deal. So learned distress, you absorbed it early in life before you had a choice in the matter. Your brain, as it absorbed learned distress, also alongside that developed a survival mechanism to help you handle learned distress, to help you live with it, to be able to get up in the morning, and a survival mechanism that fit well with the people around you. And all of this was put into place by the time you were 2.5 years old. So by definition, that means you had no choice in absorbing or having any of this put into place, because the rational brain doesn't even start to develop until you're 2.5 years old. And that's what allows you to make choices. So you absorbed this learned distress and it became part of your sense of self, which is automatically generating all of the negative situations and conditions and relationships and interactions and feelings that you experience during the day. Again, automatically generate means, again, that you are not choosing any of these negative situations or patterns. They are automatically being generated out of your learned distress, out of this absorbed sense that there's something wrong with you. And I'm wondering if you've tried to change that. Have you thought, if I just work a little harder, if I do a few more affirmations, or if I do more gratitude journaling, or I work harder with my therapist, or I search out another medical treatment, I can get on top of this. Have you felt that way and yet it's still not working? Well, the reason is that you can't think your way out of your learned distress. It's your sense of self is not accessible to your rational thinking brain or through your rational thinking brain. And so it's frustrating, right? You think, well, if I just tried a little harder, I could, and then it just never works. So the great news I have for you today is that Quanta Change was developed to deal with that whole problem of not being able to think your way out of your learned distress and the negative patterns that it's creating. The way that it does that is that it works with your brain during sleep. And that's for two reasons. Number one, sleep is when your sense of self that stores learned distress is getting recharged. And the second reason is that sleep is when this sort of wall of protection around your sense of self is deactivated, because that's when your rational brain is entirely shut down. So what Quanta Change allows you to do is tell your brain while you're asleep, while your sense of self is recharging, that you want to recharge with your core natural well-being. This is the feeling at your center that you are just great being yourself, that life is good, life can be good for you, things can work for you, you can be well. And so Quanta Change allows you to recharge with well-being instead of learned distress. And that means that layers of learned distress are peeled off permanently. And your well-being expands to take the place that those icky layers of learned distress were sitting. So as you can imagine, when that happens, you feel better. And the thing is that the more well-being there is in your sense of self, the more well-being there is for your sense of self to draw upon to generate your situations, relationships, interactions, conditions. And when those things are generated automatically out of well-being instead of out of learned distress, things work well for you. There are positive patterns in your life. There are patterns of feeling good in your life instead of feeling bad. Does that make sense? It sounds good, right? It is good. It feels really great when that happens. So I want to give you a couple of examples. And I want to say something here, because I've touched a bit on health today and illness and physical well-being, maybe mental and emotional well-being. So when I'm talking about that and I'm talking about Quanta Change helping with that, I'm not saying that Quanta Change is a substitute for medical care or some kind of treatment, but what I have seen is that Quanta Change can work really well alongside some kind of treatment that you would do, sometimes to help it work better, sometimes to help it start working. Sometimes Quanta Change can help you find the right treatment for you that you haven't been able to find before. So I just wanted to touch on that a bit. But let me give you a couple of examples of what it's like when people peel off layers of this learned distress that's generating negative patterns for them. So the first example is a client of mine who always had trouble with women in her life. And when we looked at it, it was not surprising why, because very unfortunately, she had a mom and a lot older sisters who treated her horribly. I mean, just really horribly. And they gaslighted her, they undercut her, they didn't support her, they told her she couldn't trust herself, all of these things. And so, not surprisingly, as she got into her adult life, she started to see the same kinds of patterns with women, especially in her work life. And so she would have a manager or a boss who would treat her exactly the way her older sisters and her mom did. And it was super frustrating to her when she came to me. She was working with this manager who was just awful, who never gave her access to the resources she needed to do her job well, and then would give her horrible reviews. It was just miserable. And so she started to peel off layers of this learned distress. And at one point she said, wow, Sarah, my manager is going on medical leave for a few months. And, I wish her well, but I'm kind of excited to not have to deal with her for a few months. So when it happened, she got an interim manager who was great. Total 180 from anything she'd ever experienced in a manager, and it was a woman. And she was supporting her. She was saying to my client, wow, you are so smart and you have the right handle on how to do these things, and let's just run with your way of doing these things. This is just great. So, but of course you're thinking, uh-oh, but the other manager is probably going to come off leave at some point, right? And she did. But when she came back, something strange happened. The manager came back and she said, we're going to reorganize the department. And the only reorganization that actually ended up happening was that my client got to keep reporting to the interim manager, the one who's been so great to her. She's kept doing that. It's kept getting better between her and that manager. And it's just a totally different experience of life and work life than she's really ever had as a result of that. So that's one example. I'm wondering if you can relate to that, if you can think of someone in your life, maybe a relative, a parent, an older sibling who you grew up with, who treated you in a certain way, and now you're seeing relationships in your adult life playing out in that same sort of pattern. That's because learned distress was absorbed early, and now it's generating relationships that feel that same way to you. But that really can change. I've seen it change in dozens of ways. So I hope you're feeling a bit hopeful about that. Let me give you another example that's sort of more in the realm of how someone feels and looks at life. So this is a client who his wife was always saying to him, you just need to leave your childhood behind. I know your childhood was awful, but we're here now and we have a great life, and you just need to be happy and have a good outlook about that. And he would say, well, that's a nice idea, but I still feel the same way. He had that experience of waking up every day and just feeling that same way, like the other shoe's going to drop, like he'll never be able to succeed or do things perfectly enough. And he was super frustrated about this. He was super frustrated about his relationship with his wife being contentious in this way. And so he started to unlearn that. And, I'm wondering if you can relate, if you've tried to change your outlook, the way you anticipate things coming along for you, the way you anticipate things being, and yet no matter what you try to do, you're still feeling the same sort of negative anticipation about life. So this client could really relate to you on that. But he called me for one session and he said, just sort of by the way, Sarah, you know what? I realized that I'm waking up and I'm feeling, well, happy, I think. And like, I'm looking forward to my day. I'm looking forward at what's coming in the next week or next month. And he said, it's really weird. I've never experienced this in my life. It's so strange to wake up without all of those negative voices telling me it's going to be awful. And I just don't know quite what to do with it, but it feels good. And he was even finding himself reassuring his wife when she was feeling like, oh no, there's this thing coming and maybe it's not going to work out so well. He'd say, no, I think it's going to be really good. It's kind of like they almost flipped in how they relate to each other. So if you're someone, and I can relate to this so well, if you're feeling like, oh, the next negative thing's going to come, the next negative thing, the next negative thing. I have been there, and I can tell you that really can change. So I hope that you're feeling a bit more hopeful. Or if you're the kind of person who has asked someone, why are you choosing some kind of negative pattern? I hope that you now understand better why no one is choosing misery. No one's choosing negative patterns. No one's choosing negative relationships. It can be so confusing, but it actually makes sense once you understand how learned distress is the generating force behind all of these things, and it's beyond our rational input or control, because the sense of self is just doing this for us. And I hope that you're feeling hopeful, because when more and more of those generated patterns can come from well-being, life feels so much better, works so much better. So if that's feeling intriguing to you and you want to maybe learn a little bit more, the first step to finding out if this could even be the right thing for you to do is to find out which pattern of learned distress you have. There are 6 of these patterns. They're called the idealist, the perfectionist, optimist, caregiver, defeatist, and dictator, or benevolent dictator. And these patterns encompass both the negative ways you feel about being yourself, the learned distress, and how you've survived with that learned distress. So, and the reason to find out which pattern you have is not so you can, maybe you've done a lot of therapy or other kinds of work where you've just examined your childhood in depth and you're thinking, I'm done with that. I'm so sick of doing that. I don't want to do that anymore. That's not what getting your pattern of learned distress is about. It's about finding out what you're going to be unlearning through the quanta change process, what you're going to be peeling layers off of. So I hope that sounds a little bit more fun and hopeful to you than just another way that you can examine the misery. So in order to get your test, there's a free way to do this. So in order to get your report, so you're going to go to my website and you're going to take a free, in-depth, scientifically validated personality test. It measures your learned distress and your survival mechanism. And I'm going to graph your answers for you and send you a free report with your pattern of learned distress, your survival mechanism, and how quanta change might help you really feel better and have your life work better and see these negative patterns start to dissipate. So the way that you do that is to go to my website, Quanta Change, QUANTA change.com, and click on the free report button. And I will put that link in my bio and in the description of this video. So I hope that you're feeling a bit more hopeful today and about something that's been going on for you that may have been really, really frustrating, really for a long time, because I know what that's like. And so thank you so much for joining me. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the comments for this video. And I hope that you will join me again next Friday, where I will describe another way in which quanta change really can help you feel good being you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.